Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Domino. On this episode, we talk with licensed professional counselor and so much more, Alyssa Sullinger. She is the founder of Physio Life Transformation Program, which shows high-achieving professionals how to unstuck themselves from the hold of anxiety and walk them through how to build a life that is aligned with their values, purpose, and goals. Serving in the mental health field for 7 years, Alyssa noticed patterns across different clients whose stories and pain points varied from one another, but all led back to the same culprit, an unsteady foundation. This broken foundation kept them in the same self-sabotaging pattern, showing up in therapy each week with little improvement to show for it. Alyssa believes that although talk therapy is helpful and healing in its own right, transformational healing must go beyond 50-minute sessions. Enjoy this interview.
Well, it's great to meet you. I appreciate you taking a minute out today. And before we kind of peel back the layers of your life and what you do, I want to ask you first, the last 3 years with COVID has been quite a thing for us to all live through and navigate through a pandemic. And I'm curious how you survived it and how you subsequently have changed the way that you either live your life or conduct business now that the world's kind of waking up.
Honestly, for me during COVID, I feel like I was one of the very few people that, of course, like there were inconveniences that popped up from the world closing down and the social isolated, if you will, that came from it. But I am a naturally very introverted person. So aside from some of the inconvenience factors, I feel like I came out pretty unscathed compared to the majority of people. Now, I've also been in the mental health field for going on about 7 or 8 years now. So at those times where it did get stressful, and of course it did, no one walked away completely unscathed, but I feel like I already had some of those resources and I had already been able to do some of my own inner work, my own healing, my own work with anxiety. So COVID coming didn't really throw me off entirely, but I know for a lot of people it really did. Their whole lives were upside down. It was much more than just a simple inconvenience. So I like the way that you put it, that the rest of the world kind of woke up, because I feel like, things like anxiety and depression and issues with mental health have always been there, but the pandemic allowed people to be more forthcoming with what they were experiencing and band together and recognize that they were not going through any of this alone. And I think that is a great thing that happened in the field of mental health, is normalizing the mental health struggles that everyone went through, because everyone just thinks that they're so alone in how they're feeling and in the ways that they're struggling. So, of course, there was a lot of bad that came from COVID, but I think that it also put people on the right trajectory to work towards healing and self-awareness and being honest with themselves about what they're experiencing. And so, with that being said, in terms of what I do for work, I feel like that was revolutionary for a lot of people deciding that they needed to come to therapy. And for some people that started with the pandemic, but for a lot of people, the pandemic was more so the straw that broke the camel's back sort of situation. So a lot of people that may not have gotten the help that they needed, or at least the support, they were able to get that through the pandemic. And in terms of what that looked like for me in my business, in my career, it just allowed virtual, telehealth opportunities. So, because before COVID happened, virtual wasn't really a thing. We didn't do telehealth. It wasn't something that was really thought about, and it was not something that was approved in an ethical standpoint in terms of the state boards and whatnot. And so the virtual aspect was supposed to be temporary. It's supposed to be a temporary fix to work through the social distancing of COVID, but it really became a really big thing, and it helped a lot of people who maybe for one reason or another wouldn't typically go in an office for in-person sessions. Some people have, whether it's transportation or scheduling issues or even just crippling social anxiety, they were able to have this new option of telehealth. And so what was at first a temporary solution for a long-term problem is now officially something that is never going to go away. We will continue to have telehealth, and that's something that I have really enjoyed because I am an avid traveler. I have family in different states. I love to travel abroad, and if typically, I don't really take work with me abroad internationally, but if I'm in North Carolina visiting my mom, I can still hop on my sessions with my clients, and I'm still there with them. I don't have to cancel or reschedule those sessions. They can still receive that support. So being able to work from anywhere while still providing clients with that beneficial support has been life-changing, not just for them, but also for me, for therapists everywhere.
Yeah, it has been for me as a parent. I know that I have a son who's 18 who's in the autism spectrum, and to have to pick him up, take him out of school, drive all the way, half hour away, maybe spend 5 minutes where most of it's with the parent, and it's just there's so much of it that's more logistical now that I love the virtual aspect, and I think I've heard that from a lot of therapists that it's actually relieving. So. So with that being said, we have a pretty decent context of what you do, but I'm going to simplify a little bit more. If you were put in front of a bunch of third graders at a career day and one of the kids looked up and asked you what your day job is, how would you answer them?
I would tell them that I help business professionals, maybe like their own mom and dad or aunt and uncle. I help them find relaxation. I help them learn to relax and unwind a little bit and spend more time with people that they love and less time just at work. Get the opportunity to do more fun things than just the work stuff.
So let's take you back to the third grade. What did you want to be when you were in the third grade? What was your dream?
Oh, when I was in third grade, I wanted to be an actress. And I think that was just because I had friends that wanted to be a teacher, and I'm like, well, then you can only be a teacher. But if I'm an actress, I can play a teacher on TV, and then I can also be a million other different things. A multi-passionate third grader.
Wonderful. So are you happy with how everything turned out?
I am. It was not necessarily what I had ever expected. It was never really, the end goal to be where I am now as a professional counselor. I just took the steps. I had an idea of a vision, and I allowed life to guide me, and I allowed that flexible mindset to end up where I am. And yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I stop and think, if I weren't doing what I'm doing now, what would I be doing instead? And that is just a hard question for me because it's always been this. It's always been mental health.
So, all of these seeds that have become who you are get planted when we're younger. So take me back to your childhood and kind of talk to me a little bit about how these seeds began and how they've grown into who you are today.
Oh, that is an excellent question. And I love that question because I am, as a lot of therapists are, a very strong believer that our childhood sets the tone for the rest of our lives. And so most of our brain, about 80% of our brain, is developed by the time that we are 5 years old. So whatever it is, whatever the messages that we are internalizing at 5 years old is what we carry with us for the rest of our lives. So there's never that point where we wake up and we are suddenly a different person. We're just our 5-year-old self that woke up every morning and suddenly became an adult. And so I just absolutely love that question. I love that you asked that. So in my childhood, I was very much always a very empathic, caring person, and I think that was really reinforced in my childhood. So it makes a lot of sense that I chose a career where I'm allowed to have those natural gifts and abilities come through. And that's, on the more positive side of how I ended up here. But they also say in the field of especially psychology that research is me search. So, and that was absolutely true for me. I got interested in the field of psychology when I was 15 years old, a sophomore in high school. because I wanted to know why people behaved the way they did, why they did the things they did, why they acted the way they did, and just be able to make sense of other people around me. And a lot of that did stem from childhood. My parents had a pretty nasty divorce. It lasted a good couple of years of a lot of chaos. And so naturally in those sort of environments, there's this sense of unsafety in childhood because everything around us that we know is being flipped upside down, and we don't really have a lot of control over that. So a lot of us grow up with a sense of helplessness and a sense of, I'm not in control, I am not safe, I am XYZ, fill in the blank. And a lot of times it's these negative self-beliefs that we have that we take into adulthood with us. And so I think that I was trying to understand a lot of my own childhood and my own inner workings and why I thought and felt the way that I did. And in the process, I was able to apply that not only to myself, but to my childhood, my friendships, the stranger on the street sometimes even, and it just helps bring a lot of clarity. And in the process of clarity, we build self-awareness. And when we have self-awareness, that is whenever we have the tools to make a change. And so I was able to do a lot of that inner work myself, and I wanted to be able to share that with others. So that is another long-winded explanation of how my childhood did affect where I am today.
So, from a therapeutic standpoint, I'm curious, when you go through trauma at rough times when you're younger, I know that you don't ever quite get over it, but do you believe that through years of therapy and just healing in your own way, self-medicating in positive ways, that you get to a point where it's not totally healed, but it's at a point where it doesn't affect your life and you can totally move on past it?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that a lot of people carry with them, that I try really hard to challenge that thinking that just because something has been this way does not mean it's the way that it always needs to be, and we are not defined by our experiences or by our choices. And we always do have that power to overcome what has happened to us. And we can't change what happened. We're not trying to minimize or downplay the severity of what happened or what that was like for us, but we can choose where to go from that. We can choose to try to unlearn those beliefs that we've developed, or to let go of that shame. And that is another thing I'm really glad that you mentioned, because as I mentioned, a lot of our personality, a lot of our brain develops by the time that we are 5 years old. And so when we have traumatic childhoods, those experiences actually get stored in our bodies. And so that's why, if you had a really loud, unpredictable parent figure that you were scared around, if you are in an adult relationship and you're with someone who may be reenacting some of those same behaviors that scary parent had, you might experience some of the same anxiety that pops up. And you're wondering, where is this coming from? Why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling right now? This doesn't make any sense. Well, because that behavior is triggering a memory. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And that is just to reemphasize that our bodies remember things that even our brains don't. So we may not remember our childhood trauma, but our body does. And so we can learn how to think differently, and that will get us really far. But then we also need to be able to befriend our bodies and create that mind-body connection so that we can heal the anxiety or the trauma, whatever it is, that's living in our body and not just what's living in our minds.
So at the core of who you are, your inner workings, what motivates you, gets you out of bed, gets you through the day, and ultimately makes you do what you do with your life?
So are you asking me personally or generally speaking?
Yeah, no, just in general, we all have these things that we want to accomplish throughout our days. It gets us out of the bed, it gets us moving and gets us going. But what is your motivator? What is it that ultimately motivates you to do your work?
So to answer not just what motivates me, but what would motivate all of us, truly is our values. And so for me, yes, on a personal level, my values are to spread healing, to help change a life in any way possible, just by showing up, just by sharing what I know, just by validating their experience and telling them, hey, that sucks, but that doesn't have to define the rest of your life, or you don't have to carry the burden of what happened to you and allow that to, direct your course. And the amount of freedom that these messages can bring to people is what gets me out of bed every day doing what it is that I'm doing. Because like I said, when I try to think, what else could I be doing? Now, of course, don't get me wrong. There are days that it's harder than others. There are days where I'm like, wow, I really wouldn't mind working like just a more simple job, a more simple lifestyle even. But then whenever I think about that, that's, just a fleeting thought. It's never anything serious, because if I were to step away from trying to spread healing and normalizing, the conversations about mental health, then I won't be fulfilling my purpose. So I guess to answer your question, purpose and values are what are the motivators, even whenever motivation is not present.
So I'm curious, tell me, what's been one of the best client responses you've ever gotten, best fan letter you've ever received?
Honestly, some of the best moments for me is after a session, I will get an email from a client thanking me again for this session. And that alone it feels so good. But I even had a client the other day. I've been working with her for a little over a year, and she was talking to me about some struggles that other people in her life were going through at the time. And she was sharing with me the light that she was speaking into them, the advice and the support she was giving them. And, she was telling them things like, it's okay to feel your feelings, and, you don't have to push the bad feelings away. You don't have to do X, Y, Z. You can just take a mental health day. Just the light that she was speaking into them. I felt like a proud master with an apprentice who finally understood. You know what I mean? And I've had that a couple different times where I am able to provide some healing to a client, and then they go and they spread that message and they spread that healing. And so that impact is an amazing thing for me to know that is going on without me even having to talk to my clients, friends, or social group. I know that work is still being done through the people that I am working with.
So everyone out there has an idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your clients, but ultimately, you, Alyssa, you live your life. You're in charge of who you are. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Who do I think I am? Oh, that's a really good question. I think that I am someone who is always trying to learn how to be the best version of myself. I am someone who is, always looking for feedback, not just the good, but also the constructive criticism. And I think that that's something that my social group does understand well about me. They know that I'm not going to, lash out if they tell me something that I don't want to hear. And of course, we're going to hear things that we don't want to hear. But that's what a really good friend is, or a good support system is. It's someone that is going to call you on your BS and not care if you get mad. And that's what I really look for in a lot of my friendships. But yeah, so overall, I'm someone who's always just trying to become a better version of myself, whatever that looks like.
Excellent. Alyssa, if anyone out there wants to learn more about you, hire you, anything related to your world, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so the best place to get a hold of me is my website, alyssasullinger.com, my first name, last name. And when you get there, you're able to download a free ebook that I have created on redefining anxiety. And then you can also book a discovery call so that we can talk a little bit more about what sort of anxiety and overwhelm and burnout you're dealing with. and if a program that I'm creating right now would be a really good fit to help you through that. And if not, then I can just redirect you and point you in the right direction.
Perfect. Alyssa, hey, this has been wonderful. Thank you for opening up fresh insights into, mental health and things that are just ever present here in 2023. So thank you for giving me your story. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, therapy, and music from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.